Call to order the Board of Equalization meeting for Friday, May 25th, 2018. Let the record show that we have one commissioner absent, Mrs. Trustum. We'll proceed to inquire if the clerk has a copy of the published notice of the meetings as published, and a copy of the notice should be part of the minutes. Okay. And the second item on the agenda is the assessor's report, the presentations on standards of review and valuation.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you very much. I want to thank you for meeting this fine Friday morning here. And after the last meeting, I thought maybe we'd take some time to make sure we're all on the same page here as we go forward. It's very important business here. So if we could get the tech department back there to pull up the slideshow. I got to turn the power on here.
We have it in front of us here.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and go with that then.
Well, I think we should have for the public, we should have the big one up and running.
Yes.
I think she went to get Aaron, but I guess we can, commissioners, if you feel, if the rest of the public is fine with the slideshow that's within their hands, then we'll proceed. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hirschfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wanted to make sure we defined some of the common types of valuations, especially those that pertain to the valuation of city property and maybe some of the property owners who come before us. So we'll be defining market value, investment value, as well as the assessed value. And then I wanted to also speak to, it's not a valuation, but speak to the jurisdictional exception rule. Anyway, in regards to market value, as defined in the Appraisal Institute's basic text edition, the market value is the most probable price as of a specified date in cash or in terms equivalent to cash or in other precisely revealed terms for which the specified property right should sell after reasonable exposure in a competitive market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale, with the buyer and seller each acting prudently, knowledgeably, and for self-interest, and assuming that neither is under duress. And if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me at any time through this as well. So then investment value is the value of a specific property to a particular investor. As used in appraisal assignments, investment value is the value to a particular investor based on that person's or entity's investment requirements. The primary difference between market value and investment value is that for investment value, the value is to a specific individual and not necessarily that found in the marketplace. And then assessed value applies in ad valorem or at value taxation and refers to the value of the property according to the tax rules. Assessed value may not conform to market value, though it is usually calculated in relation to a market value base. Some locales estimate both an assessed value and a market value. And then one that I really wanted to point out was a jurisdictional exception. USPAP, the Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practice, is what is followed by all fee appraisers who do any kind of work for government secured or any kind of financing of that type. But the jurisdictional exception rule is intended to address assignment conditions in which there is a conflict between USPAP requirements and the requirements of federal, state, or local jurisdictions. Such conflict would preclude appraisers from complying with those conflicted parts of USPAP. In essence, what the fee appraiser has to follow to come up with the value is different than what this department has to. And I want to point out that North Dakota Board of Equalization has their sales ratio analysis, with a 90 to 100% tolerance range, and the State Board of Equalization also has a minimum of 30 sales that I need to use that goes back up to 3 years. And that comes from Code 57-1304, which authorizes the State Board of Equalization to provide rules and regulations to assessment officials. And, you know, if we go back and we look at some of the appraisals that have come before us, the purpose of each of those has always been for market value or for financing purposes. In one rare instance throughout the past years, was it for assessment purposes or ad valorem taxation value. So we start off with the purpose of the value of the appraisal being something completely different than what the purpose of the assessed value is. Okay, all right, we got our slides up there. So I wanted to kind of review the Board of Equalization process, the SWOT analysis, SWOT being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the informal Board of Equalization process stretches from city, county, and through the state level prior to the abatements. And even prior to the Board of Equalization, and part of that process is to correct parcels. Now, I wanted to point out that we had 72 parcels requested by owner to be reviewed by our assessing staff this year. 47 of those parcels were corrected by the staff, and 5 of the owners who did not get a correction continue to protest at the Board of Equalization. We did correct $90,313,000 worth of value, which kind of goes against the mantra that we hear here, that the assessing department doesn't change any values, and we steadfastly stand behind our values. And to a point in public, we do, because once it gets to this point, it is our opinion that our value is correct, and it's the right of the citizen then to bring their complaint before the board. And one of the other strengths of the process is it allows the Board of Equalization to provide oversight of the assessing data, in essence, and make sure that we're doing our job.
I have one question. Does it concern you that over 50% of the properties that requested a reassessment were incorrect and we corrected them?
Mr. Frederick, it does not. I mean, we're talking about 10,400 parcels in total.
But I mean, if we had 5,000 people come in and request assessment, would we have 2,500 corrections?
Most likely not. I mean, most of these corrections here came from property owners who did not allow access in the residential revaluation, and so that value was done from curbside. And so then after they allowed our appraiser into the property, an interior inspection allowed for a change in how that property was reviewed and a subsequent decrease in the value because of that. Two of the other instances, one of them being commercial, there was a hotel owner whose roof had failed on a full third of his property. And I mean, there's mold growing on the walls, they've got it completely barricaded away, and so that would cause for a change of value for that. And that's outside of the change in market conditions that the rest of the hotels were undergoing. And then the third example was a local farmer who had development land. As some of you have known who've come to me where we've talked about development land, there's 7 criteria. And it must meet 4 to change from ag land to commercial. Well, one of those being improvements being made to the land. So you put in a street or at least a road base and remove some tree rows or whatever. Well, in this case, the farmer had filled in the holes, plowed under the road base and planted across it, removing that 4th requirement and allowing a change back from commercial land use to ag land use. So that's included in this as well. And if we move on to weaknesses, the Board of Equalization has discretion to adjust values requested by owner. We have that as a weakness simply due to the possible arbitrary or inconsistent changes to parcels not made to like properties. I mean, the review that comes before you is limited. If you have one apartment owner, you're not looking at the data from all the apartment owners. And so that's where we think of this as a weakness. Opportunities of the Board of Equalization process. Well, it allows the chance to make assessed values more representative of the current market. I mean, there's no way around that. There's that opportunity to go beyond the limitations set by the state board. And then the one I really want to focus on is some of the threats that come about. It could open the city and county to the threat of arbitrary and capricious valuations due to limited review and an inconsistent application. The next step to that is the possible reimbursement of tax dollars through abatements. There's 4 entities that are affected by that, the city, county, schools, and park board. One of the other threats is deviating from assessor method sets precedent for a level of service difficult and expensive to fulfill on an annual basis, which could then go to increased staff workload or the needing to increase staff to handle similar concerns. So then we get into our methods evaluation, where there's single property appraisal and mass property appraisal. Single property appraisals, the pros to that is you evaluate and appraise a single property. And another pro is comparable should include the most similar properties. Cons to a single property appraisal is its inconsistency between appraisers, where every opinion is unique. Time consuming and less affordable when you look at it on a mass standard where you're trying to do 10,000 parcels, and it can be labor intensive. Whereas in a mass property appraisal, the pros are almost the opposite of that. You have a consistent valuation. You have a small amount of staff looking at it. It's time efficient and more affordable and less labor intensive. But one of the cons to mass appraisal properties, you have outliers present even in statistically accurate models. So our approaches to value then, and they're used by both the mass and income approaches, or can be, our cost approach, market approach, and the income approach to values. Some of the pros of the cost approach are consistent value of the components present, tested cost manuals and tables for accurate results, and it's most accurate for newer construction. As conversely, the cons requires adequate sales to set depreciation, and it's a little less accurate for older properties just due to that depreciation. Where in the market approach, the big pro to the market approach is it reflects the interaction between buyers and sellers. What better way of what a value of a property is what somebody's willing to pay for it. And the con to that is it requires adequate sales of like properties. You know, if you have one big box store, you're not going to have a sale of a big box store every year to help set your value. And the income approach, the pros to the income approach reflects the interaction between sales prices, income streams, and expenses, and it's most accurate on income producing properties. Cons, it requires adequate sales of like properties to determine rates. It requires adequate income and expense data from the market, and it requires a stabilized income stream for accuracy. And those cons are huge because they're all things that we're struggling with in this downturn here that was plentiful when we were going up. And so then we go to the results of these values. If we can catch the lights here. But this first slide is more for demonstration purposes only because I'm using a below market 6 GIM. I've also shown a 25% increase to income in 2018. That's just a number here, again, for demonstration purposes only. It also comes about from a conversation I had with the dad of a DSU student whose apartment rent is going up from $425 to $700. The $700 figure was verified from that property's website. It was not property owned by any of the people here before us today. I want to make sure that's made clear as well. But if we look at this, and you see back here in 2012, 13, 14, the blue line's the assessed value. The orange one here is the market value using the actual income, gross income from, in this case, Silvergate Apartments. And so back here before 14, you show where the values were, where the property was underassessed. And conversely, I don't like talking about taxes, but in essence, it was not taxed to what the full income was. And then that's important because after we cross this point here, the inverse happens. The value of the property becomes less than what the assessed value is, and as the owner has been in here stating his property is being overvalued, in essence being overtaxed. But I want to point out that, you know, we've kind of maybe hit a bottom here, and if the market continues to support an increase and swings up, we're looking at being behind the curve again. And going forward, given any additional decreases, we're going to drop that assessing line even further, which will put us further behind as this market increases. And then the last slide, I just corrected it to 7.5 GIM. That is supported by the information that I have personally reviewed and tabulated, as well as that of Mr. Joe Eibach and Dakota Appraisals in a recent appraisal that I've gotten. He's also using a 7.5 to an 8 or 8.5 GIM. And so then, in this instance, the assessed value never did reach what the true income producing capacity of the property was, and we actually crossed lines a little bit further down, but we're still out here, you know, with the property being overassessed compared to what the market would indicate. But in this instance, still, we're looking at maybe making that turn here going forward, whether it's in 2018 or maybe 2019. It's unknown, but still, that turn is coming here, and we're looking to be behind the curve again. And all of that is just to, as in moving forward, that, you know, based on jurisdictional exception and having to follow state law, knowing that the assess model follows a different trajectory than what maybe current market does, is the recommendation of the assessor and the assessing staff that we make no changes to the property values at this time. However, I do want to point out that I did go out and visit the apartments in question, and if the board so chooses, based upon that revaluation, I do have some other numbers for your review. So, Mr. President, this time we'll turn it back over to you, and we'll move forward with the setting the assessed values for these properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld. Any questions from commissioners on Mr. Hirschfeld's presentation?
Can you explain how the state says we're supposed to come up with true and fair value? Is that how they determine it in state century code?
True and full, yes.
Or true and full, excuse me. Can you explain to us that process and what their definition of true and full value is?
The definition is very similar to what we had today. As the ad valorem part said, the ad valorem values can be based on true and full. So we value the property in a manner similar to what a fee appraiser would. Where we deviate then is how we look at that market data. USPAP and the fee appraisers are looking at what is that market doing, what is the trend. So throughout the year, is the trend continuing down? Is the anticipation that the trend is going to continue down? And so that plays a part in what the fee appraiser has in his report. The assessor, through the laws and the guidelines set by the State Board of Equalization and North Dakota Century Code, we do the same thing. We're looking at the value of that property as it sits there in market sales. However, we're required to look at the entirety of the year and take the median from that. So even though it may be trending down from January to December, it's where's that July, August number out, which is the median. So that is the base then that we start from. And then if we don't have 30 sales, then we go back up to 3 years. So that gets away from what the trend is, and that's where we start deviating away from what the fee appraiser is and what the current fee market value would be of the property.
Okay. And then my next question is, when Vanguard comes in, how do they look at it?
Vanguard in a revaluation, they look at it more like the upfront the fee value is. They may not trend it as hard. They're still having to utilize that median value. But what Vanguard has done for Dickinson, not so much, because our values weren't so far out of range and tolerance as some of the other entities, but they have actually gone before the board and petitioned to allow the values to ride, if you will, even though they were outside of tolerance, because it was a full revaluation. Our values weren't that far out of tolerance or out of whack when Vanguard did that. So they're looking at it, what's that value as of the date that they're there as well.
Do you have that number? What did we go from 2014 to 2015 in total valuation?
We were up about 33% from 14 to 15, which on the commercial side, which mirrored what we did in 14, from 13 to 14 and 12 to 13 as well. And that was also the number that I was looking at increasing for 15. I mean, their number was maybe 3% different than what mine was going to be. The big difference was they, at that point, moved more value to the income-producing properties, which were producing at a rate higher than, say, downtown was. And so then they equalized across the board that way, and actually lowered some value on some downtown properties and some other parts of town where they weren't seeing the full benefit of the boom at that time.
So if we would have them come back, they'd basically do it on a fee basis.
More similar to that, yes.
So if they came in today, where do you think we would end up?
Overall, there's not going to be that much of a change because, I mean, the overall rate, the overall ratio is going to be looked at the same. What we're going to see is maybe a change in value being removed from like hotels, and maybe not so much apartments. We've really discounted apartments quite a bit, but see move from hotels and income, the oil field metal buildings, and maybe back to adding some more value to downtown and some other areas, office buildings possibly.
But I mean, if they're gonna look at market rents, and market rents are down, because that's how they're gonna look. I mean, they're gonna use income-based, right, correct?
They would certainly use income as much as it's provided to them, just like we do. But yes, if
I mean,
across the board, say the rents are down.
Because I mean, we don't have any extra sales. I mean, we're using all the sales we have, so they're gonna base it basically on income and what's reported to them.
Well, they would also expand out a little wider for sales. I mean, like in regards to mobile home parks. You know, we haven't had a sale of a mobile home park in a while, but if there was one in Watford City or Minot, they would review that as well. And, you know, if it showed a 25% decrease in that market, they might then, you know, make a similar 25% decrease to Dickinson or in that ballpark, and based off of that. I'm not able to do that until we have fewer than 30 sales in 3 years.
Like I've said before, my concern is accuracy. I just, in value. I understand that we're handcuffed in some ways, but I see some of these properties being overassessed by a big number of dollars. And I mean, in market value, you know, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I mean, we're not talking a few $1,000s on some of these. It's tens of thousands.
Now,
And-
Mr. Hirschfeld, there was a large, myself and members of staff just attended the Wilson Basin Conference, and we heard there was a large amount of property just sold, rental property just sold in Williston. Now that'll come into play next year, am I correct?
It certainly can, maybe not so much for the Dickinson Assessing Department if
Okay.
we end up with 30 sales in 3 years. If we have less than that, it certainly will.
Because we can go outside,
I
right?
can go outside of
Okay.
and review that.
Did you have
That was all.
continuation?
No, that was all I have.
Mr. Hirschfeld, you were starting to state something?
Mr. President, if I was, it's left my mind right now.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld? Not, the Board of Equalization shall proceed to equalize and correct the assessment roll according to North Dakota Century Code 5711-03. The board may change the valuation and assessment of any real property upon the roll by increasing or diminishing the assessed valuation thereof as shall be reasonable and just to render taxation uniform according to North Dakota Century Code, except that the valuation of any property returned by the assessor shall not be increased more than 25% without first giving the owner or his agent notice of the intention of the board to increase it according to North Dakota Century Code 57-11-03. The board will now hear any person, his attorney or agent, feeling aggrieved by anything in the assessment roll may apply to the Board of Correction of alleged errors in the listing of valuation of his real property, and the board may correct the errors as it may deem just according to North Dakota Century Code 57-11-04. Only the properties held over from the prior Board of Equalization meeting night shall be heard today. And the property representatives, we shall start with, is there any representative from Mr. Miles Bob? And Mr. Bob had a grievance with his valuation of his property, and there's no representative from Mr. Bob, and we have a recommendation from the assessor's office not to change. Commissioners, any questions for the assessor? And Mr. Bob has no representative here. Not, if there are no questions of the assessor, I would look for a motion on Mr. Bob's property.
Mr. President, I move we concur with the value obtained by the assessor.
Okay, so I guess the motion would be to deny the request. Is that?
I move to deny the
okay.
request
So we have a motion
from
to
the
deny.
property owner.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the request for a change of value.
Second.
With a second. Any further comments or questions? Now, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion to deny the request is approved. The next piece of property on our agenda is item B, Mr. Jared Uloff. Does he have a representative? Seeing no representative. Mr. Hirschfeld, do you have any comments on this property?
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. Mr. Uloff had provided an appraisal for the property. It was 3 parcels. They're all mini storage that sold. The assessed value on those was $1,938,000. That's what the property owner is looking to have the value changed to. The assessed value on that is $2,154,000 as a total, a sum of the 3 different parcels. That's a difference of 10%. Just wanted to point out this is kind of the inverse argument of what we were talking about with the Century Apartments, where it possibly could have sold for less due to the compiling of 3 parcels instead of those parcels selling individually. And so it's the recommendation of the board where we're anticipating with the sales of 17 indicating a decrease next year. We're 10% different from the assessed value, or I mean from between the assessed value and the appraisal, that we make no change at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld. Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on this property? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we deny the change in value on Mr. Jared Uloff's 3 parcels.
We have a motion to deny with a second.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion to deny the request of change is approved. We'll move to the next set of properties. Item C, Mr. Terry Clement. Mr. Clement, do you wish to approach the board?
I see Joe has come down on a couple of them. The one, 12-plex at 2150.
Mr. Clement, could you pull the mic over a little bit?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
The 12-plex at 2150 First Street West. It's assessed at 106,000. You know, I don't know if there's any other 12-plex in town that's assessed that high. But, you know, it's half full. The rents, obviously don't cover the mortgage and taxes and insurance and things like that. The appraisal was, Joe's got 73.6, that must be the appraisal. I thought it was around 77, but anyway, I've had a couple guys looking at it. I'd sell it for 77 if I could get it. So I thought those ought to be changed a little bit. As far as 1589 and 1527, I was just looking at these other properties on here, like Royal Manor. That's, assessed at 38,000. He's dropped these down to 45. And, Royal Manor's just about exactly the same building as 1527 and the same square footage per apartment on 1589. And his units are in better shape. So I thought that should have came down a little more. Trying to get things in line with, I don't know, it looks like Carlos cut them down pretty good. So that's my thoughts. I think those that 12 and 8-plex ought to come down a little bit from, you know, it's a 12-plex and it's assessed at 1,272,200. Same with that 8-plex on 128 23rd Avenue West. It's 843,400. They're both about 106, 107,000 units what they're assessed on. I would think that the board probably thinks that's a little high. That's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Clement from commissioners?
I have one question. At the 106,000 value per unit, what is that considered in that 106? 2 bath, half bath?
Okay, I guess you're Chris.
Pardon?
3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a garage.
Attached garage?
No, detached garage.
Detached garage.
Yeah.
And you think a more fair value is the 75,000?
Well, I had told Joe 77,000, but I thought that was the appraisal. Maybe the appraisal was a little less, but we spent $4,000 on an appraisal, and they came in at around 900,000, something like that. So we do have an appraisal on the 12-plex, and the 8-plex is identical. They're identical units, same square footage, same builder, same cabinets, same carpets, everything. Garages are the same size. I mean, yeah, it's,
Mr. Hirschfeld, I somewhat agree with Mr. Clement's assessment of the 77,000. I'm thinking back to some other property that we reviewed and so on, and I think it was right in that 70,000 mark. Do you see any reason why we would not go down to 77 on these two?
Mr. President, Commissioner Steiner, in the write-up there, I do have a note about a small but serious error in the appraisal report. The appraiser relied heavily on one sale of a newer property, very similar to Mr. Clement's, that sold for $860,000. And so when we were talking about that market approach and like properties selling, he relied heavily on that. However, he forgot that the one property was a 4-plex and the other one was a 12-plex. And so you end up with a very similar 12-plex valued at $20,000 more than the 4-plex in that appraisal. And to me, that looked like a grievous error, and I did not have an opportunity to ask the appraiser what kind of a difference that would have made on his appraised value. But it certainly threw enough concern towards me that that value was incorrect, and that's why I didn't give any credence to it.
Mr. Clement, who was the appraiser?
it's out of Bismarck, but Dakota Bank is the one who hired him. Buckmeyer or something like that. I don't have the.
I believe that's a Buckmeyer.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one it was, but.
And he's been appraising for a long time, so.
Mr. Quinn, what's the square footage of one unit in either 128 or 2150?
Approximately 1190.
Pardon?
1,190 feet, I believe.
Almost 1,200 square.
1,190,
Okay.
close to 12.
Per unit?
Per unit. I think it's around
Kind of got me bouncing back up to where we have it.
Well, we have before us, and if you're finished with questions for Mr. Clement, we'll have Mr. Hirschfeld. If you have any more questions for Mr. Clement? Not, Mr. Hirschfeld, any information you want to provide us before?
In regards to the Jewel Blue and the TMJ properties, I don't have any further data. It's just my opinion that the appraisal did not accurately represent the value of that Jewel Blue property, and thenceforth the other one as well, which are within $600 per unit. In regards to the older units, I haven't put those side by side with the Royal Manor, because I know that those two were put in a below average or a poor condition, where Royal Manor's in an average condition. So there may be a discrepancy in the room size. The square footage of each unit might be higher, which may be why these individual values are showing a $7,000 difference. I just don't have a good answer for you on that. But again, my recommendation is to stay with the current assessed value, due to the concerns I have with revaluing in between revaluation cycles for condition. I mean, condition changes. That request could come in annually from property appraisal, property owners, and just want to make sure that the board is aware of what that precedent might set.
You can look on the website, the square footages are the same.
Okay.
I mean, I
Right.
provided all that.
Okay, before us as a board, we have the opportunity to either provide a motion to deny. We can provide a motion to accept the valuation of the property according to the appraised value at $884,000, or we can change the value as identified in 1670-2915, change to the value whatever we desire. We need to address each property here individually. So we will start, I guess I will take a motion on whatever properties you as commissioners would like to start. I would like to start, my personal opinion, we start at the top and move down, but if there's a different direction you want to start, I'd also look at that motion. In hearing none of the commissioners will having a idea where they want to start.
You're talking about each individual unit
yes.
starting from the top?
Start from the top. So
I see that Tamale, there is a difference of $125,000 that we've reduced the value on. I would move that we deny the request to change the, well, I want to change the value down to the recommended from the assessor, which is a decrease of $125,800.
okay, so we have a value of $951,500. The value after of $825. So are you moving for the Tamale?
Well, right, if I wanted to go down to 825, I don't know if we deny the request, because, so, I recommend we make the change down to
To the $825,000. So your motion would be actually, motion number 3, I move to change the value of the property identified as parcel and.
That would work. I
Right.
move to change the value of the property identified as partial, 1670.
No, that would.
Nope, not the one.
Not the one, it's
Got
11.
it.
11.
1140, 0600, 2300, down to 825,700.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion or questions on this property? Hearing no further questions or comments on this property, we have a motion to change the value of the property identified as parcel 1140-0600-2300 and change the value to $825,700 with a second. We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll move to the next property. The Abode, am I saying that correctly? Abode
Yeah. both
Properties
yeah.
Incorporated, 24 units. The property parcel is 1140-0600-2601. Present value is 1.161 million. There's a value after of 1.081300. I would look for some questions on this property for Mr. Hirschfeld or a motion on this property.
Mr. President, I move we change the value of the property identified as 1140-0600-2601 to $1,081,300.
Second.
We have a motion to change value to 1.081. Let me readdress that. We have a motion to change the property to $1,081,300 with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll move to the next property, Jewel Blue LLC, 12 units. Property parcel is 1670-2900-1500. The value listed is 1,272,200. Value after is 1,272,200. We have a request from owner to lower that per unit to 77,000. Any discussion or questions? Now I'd look for a motion.
I'll move to deny the request on this one.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the request on the Jewel Blue. And I will second.
You seconded?
Yes. There, unless you're gonna,
No.
no, I'll second. Any further discussion, questions? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion to deny is approved. We'll move on to 1670-2900-1200, TMJ Properties LLC and Heath LLC. Current value is $853,400. Value after, $853,400. We have a value per unit of $106,675 with a request from ownership for $77,000 per unit. Any questions or comments on this property?
Is there actually a request to, was there an appraisal done on this one also?
It's the same units.
Units.
You know, no, there wasn't an appraisal done on that one, but the other appraisal reflects that. Yeah, 106, I mean, maybe you've got some other suggestion, but 106 is way too high.
So I would look for a motion. And again, we have options before us, so.
You know, I've talked to the other people, a couple guys that own it. Now, if they buy me out at 77,000, is that gonna reflect the sale?
Mr. Clement, that would not be an arm's length sale because they're buying interest in their own property, so that couldn't be reflected in our analysis, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've talked to Gene Jackson and Mike Mouse, who are the other two owners, and I think they'll buy me out anyway.
Again, I would look, if there are no further questions for ownership or Mr. Hirschfeld, I would look for a motion. We have the opportunity to deny take the appraised value or adjust the value.
Mr. President, and I want to go back to talking about Jewel Blue and the TMJ properties. If we, the 106,675 and the 106,000, 17,000 appears a little high to me. I know he's requesting $77, but I think a more fair cost per square footage of what I'm seeing in my business and industry, if it was down to about 90,000 per unit. On the Jewel Blue, that would take from 1,272,200.
Well, we've already,
Yeah, I know,
Pass the
I know,
motion
but
on Jewel.
I'm throwing at both of them, so if, you know, I hesitated on that one there. I'm still trying to get my numbers here, but the TMJ properties,
It's
let me just take a
1,080,000.
look here.
It's 1,080,000 at 90,000.
That would, is that Jewel Blue?
Yeah, that'd be
Jewel Blue?
that'd be a million.
Okay, yeah, at the 90, we bring that down to
1,080,000,
1,080,000.
80,000.
I would throw that out there if we can go back and correct.
I
That
think the
one.
motion is ready.
Do we?
I think we have already passed that motion, so.
Procedurally, if you're looking at me, what could be done, there'd have to be a motion to rescind the prior motion, it would have to be seconded, and then that would have to pass, and then you would have to redo the motion.
Yeah, I apologize for that, but I was just running the numbers in my head, and that wasn't good enough, so I had to use my calculator here. But so you're saying the original motion would have to be rescinded by the person that made that motion? If we wanted to change it, I would throw it out. My thinking is, and I'm going to throw it out there, that we change the Jewel Blue to the $90, and then when we come to this TMJ properties, I feel that the 90 is more reflective of what I'm seeing also. I'll throw that out there if you want to rescind or if you feel comfortable with your motion.
Jason, what are your thoughts when you're looking at the map?
You know, you just look at this paper and you're taking a shot in the dark. I mean,
Right.
I look at the appraised value. I mean, to me, and, you know, and I know Mr. Hirschfield had stated that he found an error, he thought, in the appraisal, but, you know, you're talking almost $30,000 difference. You know, times 12, that's a big chunk. I mean, that's a lot. So, I mean, even if there was an error, was it a $30,000 error? I guess I don't know. It's actually more than 30. I'm open. I don't think 90 is out of question either. So, I think that's probably a little closer to realistic.
My feeling is it's a little higher than 90, but
I mean, I know the unit on First Street West. I mean, I know what the unit it looks like. So, it's a newer building. I mean,
Well, you're in the business. Would you build a unit for 106,000, or could you do it for 90?
I don't know. I don't do much multifamily, so
Well,
Well, it sounds
If-
like
if you don't
guys
need
want-
to, that's fine.
It sounds like you guys want to revisit, so I will rescind my original. I'll move to rescind.
he moved to rescind.
did I second it?
I seconded it, but you can.
You
second-
second
You can second this.
you can. Yeah.
So you're seconding his move to rescind?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to rescind with a second. All in favor of Mr. Altman's motion to rescind his original motion? Support by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion to rescind is approved. So now we'll look for a new motion and or discussion. And like I have stated, I understand the board's concerns with this. I don't agree with the 77,000. I don't necessarily agree with 90,000. I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere. But I also believe with newer property that there is some value in newer property opposed to older property, especially in the climate that we're in. And I think that it'll be reflected.
And they're almost 1,200 square foot.
Yes, they're very large.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we change the value of the property identified as 1670, 2,900, 1,500 to 1,152,000, which is about 95.
1,152,000.
Yep.
95,000 units.
I'd second that.
So we have a motion to change 1670-2900-1500 to $1,152,000 with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll move on to 1670-2900-1200 TMJ properties.
That's using
95.
995. I'm a little more familiar with this property, but I would make that same motion using 95.
So that total value at 95,000 per unit is 760,000.
760,000.
So we have a motion for 1670-2900-1200 TMJ Properties LLC and Heath Prop LLC for the 8 units of 760,000 at 95,000 per unit
I'd second that.
for the second. Any further discussion or questions? Now we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are finished with your properties, Mr. Clement.
Okay.
The next up is item on the agenda is properties owned by Mr. Carlos Royal, and his representative is Mr. Dave Bauer.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I wrote myself a note here to have fun and smile, so I'll try to do my best. Thanks for allowing me to present information regarding Mr. Royal's properties here in Dickinson. My goal is to give you the necessary information and tools to assist you in arriving at a compromise value as requested at the May 7th Board of Equalization meeting. Mr. Royal's email to all of you on May 24th referenced the North Dakota Century Code as to what the purpose of these meetings is to be about, namely to arrive at the true and full value of taxable properties. At the May 7th City Board of Equalization meeting, Mr. Royal presented information justifying his valuations on his properties. He supplied independent appraisals, comparable sales, and income and expenses to the board. On the property tax assessment process brochure, that's the brochure I actually gave you, the top one there. The highlighted portion reads, "The assessment may be reduced upon presentation of evidence to support the appeal." I asked Kimberly Vietmeyer, a property tax specialist of the North Dakota Office of State Tax Commissioner, I asked her what would constitute evidence to support the appeal based off of that brochure. Her response was, any instance, income information, or a recent market appraisal. And then she goes on to say, there is not a definition of evidence to support the appeal. Since there is no definition of evidence to support the appeal, I would submit Mr. Royal has submitted to this board the industry standards to set valuations on his properties. As you know, this board has the opportunity to set valuations on Mr. Royal's properties. On May 7th, at the BOE meeting, President Decker sought a motion from the board members to provide valuations on Mr. Royal's properties. I recall 2 different requests from President Decker for a motion from the board, and there was no motion presented. In an effort to assist in this process, you have before you a packet consisting of property tax assessment process, a comparison chart, a comparable sales chart, and a comparison chart, City of Dickinson. The comparison chart highlights appraisal values, gross income multipliers, and compromises Mr. Royal has offered, and the assessor's valuations. Note 4 at the bottom of the page is important to read. It reads, current offer to compromise, this would be Mr. Royal's compromise offer, is 70.04% of the assessed value when 2 sales plus current listings are at under 50% of assessed value. The next page is the comparable sales chart. This highlights the known sales since 2016. 2 key points on this chart are: 1, the price per unit column, which represents the market price set by a willing seller and a willing buyer in an arm's length transaction to close the deal. Example would be 423 Sims, sale price of $360,000 divided by 12 units, $30,000 a unit. The second point, which would be the far right column, represents the sold price to the assessed value in percentage form. Again, 423 Sims. Sale price of $360 divided by the assessed value of $790,000 is 45.57%. This represents the open market is valuing this property at roughly 1/2 of what the city assessor values the property. Another way to say it is the assessor is valuing the property at 2 times what the open market is valuing the property. Of course, there's other examples on the chart. The comparison chart, City of Dickinson, is for your use in completing the column labeled Commissioner's Values. That's the one that's all blank. This is where you supply the values of the properties. As you notice on the left side are Mr. Royal's values for his properties, including his proposed compromise. This was requested from the May 7th Board of Equalization meeting. On the right side of the chart is the assessor's assessment values. A couple of notes on the values provided by the assessor. I wish I had a little water. Mr. Hirschfield met with me earlier this week to review and inspect and tour Mr. Royal's investment properties. We walked the grounds around the properties, inspected a few apartments, and toured common areas. And as a result of the tours, Royal Manor, which is listed there, was the values increased $2,492 per unit. 8th Avenue East, the values decreased by $5,900 per unit. And Park Place, the values decreased by $9,233 per unit. What is interesting to me is that the values changed after the tour. I suspect that Vanguard Appraisals did not accurately report the physical condition of these 3 properties, and as such, the values were incorrect. It is also interesting that Mr. Royal was here in 2017 going through the same process as now, and there was no tour or physical inspection to catch the property condition as being misrepresented in the 2017 valuation. North Dakota Century Code states, quote, assessors should inspect properties in their jurisdictions. So I say thank you to Mr. Hirschfield for taking time to tour Mr. Royal's properties with me earlier this week. One other little note on this, Mr. Royal has 6 properties listed on the sheet. 50% of them, or 3 of them, were changed since my tour with Mr. Hirschfeld. So going to Mr. Friedrich's, Commissioner Friedrich's comment about the 72 appeals and 47 of them had changes to them is reflected in 3 of the 6 of Mr. Royal's, or 50% of them being changed because of a physical inspection. Final thoughts, and this goes to earlier conversations. Again, I appreciate Mr. Hirschfeld's packet of information because these are my final thoughts on this process. There are 2 separate realities when working through the appeal process. On the property owner side is the market reality. Market reality deals with income and expenses, comparable sales, independent appraisals, and the open market. The overriding principle is, since this is an income-producing property, what is it worth to a willing buyer or to a bank for refinancing in the open market? The other reality is what I call the hidden reality. The reason I call it the hidden reality is because it is hidden from the market reality. The market reality knows nothing of what is hidden. Examples of the hidden reality include CAMA mass appraisal models, government triggers of some sort when valuations are out of tolerances, some sort of limits or caps put on how much a property can be adjusted. These and other factors not known to the property owner affect your decisions in placing values on properties. And as we have discovered, the mass appraisal model is only as accurate as the team doing the inspections and reviews. In Mr. Royal's case, 3 of his 6 buildings had their values adjusted after Mr. Hirschfeld physically inspected the properties, a 50% error ratio. The North Dakota Office of State Tax Commissioner Property Specialist, Kimberly Vietmeyer, stated to me, quote, "We do take into consideration market rents when performing the income approach. So at the state level, they appear to use open market data as a means of determining full and true value." Mr. Royal is seeking a good faith compromise as was requested by this board from May 7th meeting. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Mr. Bauer? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Hirschfeld?
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. No change, stand on record that requesting no change to the values. One comment on the change that has occurred between the before and after values is it was a condition change after 3 years. You know, condition may change depending on how a property's been treated during that time. Doesn't necessarily mean that the prior inspection was incorrect. It's just different at this market period. And that is the concern of the assessing department, is that the precedent being set with these changes will be everybody would like us to revalue annually. Oh, I had a renter in here, tore this room up. That changes my condition. We are not staffed to, at that level, to go through 1,200, 1,500 commercial properties annually to review condition scores for themselves. So with that, I don't have any additional information to provide, and we'll answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld?
My only question, you know, this has been on here since I've been on the commission. Every year we look at this one. So, and I've only been on here not even 2 years. So, I mean, why in the past 3 years haven't we went to the property and looked at it if he's been asking? I mean, I just don't understand. If we're looking at this thing for the last 3 years, why only this year did we go look, and why haven't we done it in the past?
The abatements were for the 2015 year, which was the year that Vanguard was there and physically evaluated. If I'd have went in last year, well, for the same concern that I have going in this year, would have been the same as last year. It's not reflective of what the condition of the property was at the time Vanguard went through it for that value. It may not. I mean, it could be, but it may have been something different as well.
I mean, what if they made a mistake?
And that was where we were trying to go through the property record card and see what the mistake might have been. And that was what I've always asked for, is where is the property record card incorrect? And that question was never answered. There was nothing to point it to other than, well, you're using the wrong rate or the wrong this or the wrong that. There was never was any error pointed out in the property record card. And so the inspection that I made this year that showed that the condition as of this past Monday was different maybe than what it was 3 years ago.
Any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld on Mr. Royale's property?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move to change the value of property identified as partial 0010 2400-1100 from $542,200 to $431,400.
Okay, so we have the Eastmore property, Eastmore Financial Park Place, 12 units, 001, 0-2400-1100. We have a motion to change from the $542,200 to $431,400. With a second. Any further discussion? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We'll just move down the list then. We have, the next property is Champion Oil, 8th Avenue East, 23 units, 0050-0810-0000. Initial value before was 930,000. We have value after of 794,000. The grievance, the owner's request is 676,568.
Mr. President,
Mr. Frederick,
I make a motion to change the value on 0050-0810-0000 to 794,800.
we have a motion to change to 794,800 on the 8th Avenue properties
Second.
with a second. Any questions or further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next property is Eastwood, 36 units, 0050-1003-0000. We have a value, current value of $1,088,400 with no change
Years ago.
from city staff. Requested, owner's request was $1,088,392.
So what I'm assuming is they agreed on this value?
You got an $8 or,
Well, I mean, within,
I think you ought to go Mr.
Within a
Royals
couple
way,
dollars.
give him the $8.
you have $8, so.
I mean, I look at this one the same way as the one before. I mean, if you look at the appraised value in 17, I mean, we're within some kind of tolerance there, $38,000. I mean, I guess with that, I'd make a motion to not change 0050-1003-0000 and leave it at $1,088,400.
We have a motion to deny
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion or questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion to deny is approved on Eastwood. Next property up is Winmore Financial, Royal Manors, 24 units. Parcel number is 1120-0200-0500. The value before was $860,500. Value after, and this was, I take it after your walkthrough, Mr. Hirschfeld.
President Commissioners, that is correct.
Value went to $920,300. The aggrieved property owner is requesting $860,496, and the original value was $860,500.
During the inspection, what did we see different that raised the value?
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick, the condition of the Royal Manor was, it was the best, it was the property that had the best condition score of all of them that I'd visited this week. And it had been in a below average condition before, so I felt it was warranted to increase that condition up to normal or to average, which allowed then for the other properties to be put into a lower condition score. Because once we start getting below average, we've got a poor, and then it starts becoming a property that needs to be raised, and none of them were in that poor of condition where I thought they had to be scraped and something else done with them.
And that's the risk of some re-evaluation. You win some, you lose some. But in the end, it's supposed to be what's fair.
So after that discussion and questions, I would look for a motion. Are we Staying with the original valuation of 860,000, the new assessed after the walkthrough of 920,000, or the request to 860,496.
Mr. President, I move we change the value of property identified as partial 1120-0200-0500 to 920,300.
You have a motion to change the property value to 920,300
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman? Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Move on to Silvergate, 12 units. Parcel number 0050-0302-0000. The value before was 790,700. We have a value after of 790,700. We have a request from the aggrieved property owner of $612,000. There are no questions for staff. I would look for a motion.
Mr. President, I move to deny the request for change in value.
Second.
A motion to deny with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Denial on Silvergate is approved. The last property is Brookdale Financial, Century Apartments, 120 units, parcel number 1160-0100-0101. Value before was $7,890,300. Value after a re-inspection of $6,499,000. And the aggrieved landowner is asking for a valuation of $4,920,000. Any discussion or questions for staff? Not, I'd look for a motion.
We were at, what, about 65,000 a unit prior? Is that what that value is? I think, if my math is correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner Frederick, I believe that to be pretty close, if not accurate.
It
Yes.
should be on one of those sheets.
Yeah, it was 65,753. Assessor's proposed value after, if I'm correct, Mr. Hirschfeld, was 54,158.
Mr. President, that is correct.
The request from Mr. Royale is, the original request at the original city hearing was $34,208, and Mr. Royale's compromise is $41,000. And I'll state again for the public, the value before was $7,890,300. After the talk and the walkthrough for Mr. Hirschfeld, the new value is $6,499,000, and the request is $4,920,000. So I'd look for a motion if there are no further questions.
Mr. President,
Frederick?
I guess in reviewing this from the last meeting, 55,000 was kind of something that popped in my head as a, so it's pretty close to what I thought was a fair value when we looked at this last time. So with that being said, I'd make a motion to change the value on 1160-0100-0101 to $6,499,000.
We have a motion to change value on parcel number 1160-0100-0101, or better known as Century Apartments, to $6,499,000.
Second.
With a second. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman? Aye. Chair votes aye. And that concludes all aggrieved landowners. Am I correct, Mr. Hirschfeld?
Mr. President, Commissioners, I believe that to be correct. I don't know of anybody else that was, that we did not contact or review here that was
Okay.
left over, so.
And that being so, you have the proper amount of time to file this with the county?
Mr. President, yes, we'll send these corrections over to the county post-haste, and we'll be able to have those values ready then for their meeting.
Any other comments from staff? Not, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.